As a fitness professional, you know the joy of helping others, and you know it's more than just fitness. We're training the whole person. Wellness coaching provides expertise that goes beyond fitness and nutrition. It's a holistic approach to helping others become their best selves while reaching their goals. To us, there's no greater joy than that. Join the fitness leader. Become a fitness leader. Become a certified wellness coach. Go to nasm.org/wellness.
Well, hello there, listener, and welcome to this week's episode of the Better Than Fine podcast, where we help you make sense of wellness nonsense. I'm your host, Darlene Marshall, and when I tell people that I studied positive psychology, I tell them about the science of well-being and happiness and flourishing and all of that. What they really want me to give them a lot of the time is a roadmap to happiness. They want like a how-to guide to flourish in 10 easy steps, kind of like every other self-helpy style discipline out there. And they're a little disappointed because what I tell them is that is not how any of this stuff works. That's not how flourishing works. That's not how happiness works. It's not a series of check boxes or like cheat codes you can put into a video game and level it up. And partly that's because everyone is different. Everyone is at a different place in their life journey. They need different things. They need different tools and tips and ideas and tricks. So if it's positive psychology is not just a step-by-step guide to happiness, then they often ask me, well, then what is it? If you're not going to tell me what it is, what is it? So in addition to being a field of study and a body of evidence, right? What scientists who are studying happiness and well-being and flourishing, right? That's one side of positive psychology. For us normies out here living a life, not doing that research, not designing studies and executing them, which is one aspect of positive psychology. For the rest of us, I believe that it is a well-being mindset and a lifestyle. And that's really what I want to unpack for you in today's episode. Let me break down that first one for you. A mindset is when we have a set of beliefs about something to do with life, whether it's globally a mindset about life and living or in a specific domain of life. And then that mindset, that collection of beliefs influences your behavior. So the prime example of this is a growth mindset. You've probably heard of growth mindset somewhere in the ether, whether it's on the internet or at work or coaching or listening to podcasts like this one. So a growth mindset is a set of beliefs specifically around success and achievement. And specifically a growth mindset is when we believe that success is predicated on skills and abilities, right? We have some kind of, growth mindset is when we believe that it's skills and abilities we can work on. Its counterpoint is a fixed mindset where we think that it's just like God-given talents, right? And in a growth mindset, I can grow because I can learn new skills, right? So that's what mindsets are in general. But what is a well-being mindset? Well, that's what today's episode is really about. A well-being mindset is when we have a system of beliefs that builds towards flourishing and resilience so that even when challenges come, we still do really well. And that's a well-being mindset. And that mindset would then make you better in your life and out in the world doing the things you want to do and accomplish. I think that sounds pretty good. Hopefully you think that sounds pretty good too. But then that begs the question, okay, well, how do I build a well-being mindset? This all sounds really great, Darlene, but I want that. I want the happiness thing. That's why I wanted you to give me the how-to guide, right? That's what I want to dive into. The title of this week's episode is Keys to a Well-Being Mindset. And I want to share with you my experience in helping people build these tools and what are the keys that I come to believe is the axioms, the foundation of the practice of a well-being mindset. So let's get to it. Let's talk about the keys to a well-being mindset, what, why, and yes, how. And the first key is the idea that the absence of the bad is not the same as the presence of the good. This is a foundational idea in positive psychology. I can't claim the core nugget, I can just claim the way that I explain it. And so it actually bases its roots in psychotherapy, specifically Freudian psychotherapy. So that's that cliche of you're like laying on the couch with the doctor with the notepad by your head who's going, tell me about your childhood. That's Freud. And so in Freudian psychotherapy, you would talk about all your problems, thinking that if we could just excavate the reasons, the history of what was making you unhappy, if we could bring it to the surface, it would, I don't know, somehow magically make it better. Unfortunately, what we came to find is that that premise was wrong. When we focus on examining only what's wrong with people, you could trace all of your neuroses back to the roots. It just means that you're focusing on everything that's wrong with people. It just heightens the negativity bias. All of us have a natural bias to focus on bad things in a given situation. And it turns out that if I just lay on the couch and talk about, I don't know, when my kitten died, which is a thing that actually happened. But if I think about it too much, I get more and more sad as opposed to thinking about all the positive things about having a kitten. Sorry for the cat lovers if that was unnerving. You can't only focus on excavating our problems. We have to instead recognize, yes, this is the context that I come from. These are the challenges that I faced in life. And we've got to go actively into building the good into our life. That's actually what counteracts negativity bias. So if the absence of the bad isn't the same as the presence of the good, yes, let's mitigate problems, but then let's also focus intentionally on building the good stuff into our life. And then what is that good stuff? How do I get more of it? That's more in the field of positive psychology study. So that's our first key to a well-being mindset. The absence of the bad isn't the same as the presence of the good. All right, our second key in a well-being mindset, that not everything works for everyone all of the time. Not everyone needs every practice. Not everyone starts in the same place. Like if you're already an ultra marathoner, if you're already clocking 100 miles a week and you're just your like dropout practice runs, and I tell you to start going for mindful walks, that might not actually help you, right? And so we want to recognize where people are in their life journey, in their wellness or well-being journey, and give a nod to not every practice is what everyone needs. Now, counter to that is also that some practices require prerequisite psychological skills. If I'm going to do a more advanced contemplative mindfulness, emotional intelligence building practice, well, that person's going to need concentration, foundational mindfulness and self-awareness, ability to like monitor their own patterns, some ideas about what those things even mean, right? Those are prerequisite. So if I give them that really advanced practice, they might feel like they're failing, and that's going to diminish their well-being. Or if you've listened to the show for a long time, you've probably heard me talk about why I use the word appreciation instead of gratitude, right? Because I grew up hearing gratitude as obligation. And so the first 10 years that I practiced gratitude, I really struggled because I had a misfire in the association of what that word even meant to me. I was missing a prerequisite skill. It's also true that some conditions don't actually jive with some practices. And the perfect example of this, you talk to people who are really into meditation and they'll talk like meditation is for everyone. It's perfect. It cures everything. Just meditate and you'll feel good. In actuality, there's some psychological conditions that meditation makes it worse. And I think of severe clinical depression. Someone with severe clinical depression, if I ask them to think about their thinking, it will cause a downward spiral because they're focused on all their negative thoughts and it drags them down. So there actually isn't any one practice that universally helps everybody. And even movement can be tricky. Even though I talk about how great movement is on this show all the time, right? Not everything works for everyone all the time. So the trick is to figure out, what is the change that you're looking to make? What is the practice that can help you make that change? And then how do you work through any roadblocks that come up? And what are you ready, willing, and able to change in your life sustainably? If you want to dive deeper into why some of this can be a problem, right? If we try to say, like, oh, it's everything for everyone all the time, and the lack of specificity, go back into the archives and check out the Wellness Overwhelm episode from June of 2022. That'll really paint the picture for you nicely of why we don't want everyone to think that everything is for them, because it just overwhelms people. You're listening to the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Marshall, and we're talking about the keys to a well-being mindset. What if well-being, instead of thinking about it like a how-to manual, like a lot of self-help does, what if it's a mindset that goes along with a set of practices? So our first key, the absence of the bad is not the same as the presence of the good. So we don't just want to mitigate the bad, we want to cultivate the good stuff in our lives. Our second key, not everything works for everyone all the time. So you got to figure out, what's the practice that I'm trying to cultivate? What's the change that I want to make in my life? And what are the tools that will support me in making that change? And if I get stuck, how do I get unstuck? Key number 3, and this is a big one. This comes up a lot in my work. Focus on what actually matters to you. Probably the most common question that I get out in the wild talking to people about their well-being is, how do I make myself stick with it? Whatever it is, whether we're talking about a diet, we're talking about, sleep habits, exercise, meditation, journaling. How do I get myself to stick with that practice that I know is foundationally good for me, but I'm struggling with consistency? And when I say I get this question, I get this question weekly. When I go out speaking and I'm talking to people in the crowd, they're always like, yeah, I totally get what you want. How do I make myself do it? And what I tell them is, actually, I ask them, and they always seem kind of surprised because they're like waiting for me to give them like the tip, the hack, the trick. What I ask them is, what's the most important thing in your life? And they kind of balk. And I'm saying, like, what matters to you? What's worth changing for? Not, and a lot of times I'll get really token responses like, oh, family or God. And I'm like, cool, cool, cool. No, like day to day in your life, next 3 to 6 months, next couple of years, what do you care about? And that's where you really get into it. Like my kids, my career. I have a sick parent. I want, my partner is my best friend and I live for our time together. And once I really get to the juicy nugget, the thing that this person actually cares about, maybe they are part of a nonprofit organization, they volunteer, and that's what really fills them up. Then I ask, well, how is the thing that you're struggling to do consistently going to make you better at that thing you care about? And if, we'll gab a bit about how does this change relate to that? If you are a parent, it's not just about the parent you're going to be tomorrow, it's about the parent you're going to be in 20 years. If you are thinking about a partnership, I just had a major medical scare over the last couple of weeks, and watching it not just affect me and my own mindset, but how it affected my husband. He was really scared. So my health affects him and everyone who cares about me. And so when we anchor the things that we want to change, what we're struggling to change, to the things that matter most to us, not just right this second, but 5, 10, 40 years in the future, that shifts the motivation connection and it can shift our internal dialogue. Because to be honest, 13 years I've been doing this, it isn't a magic wand. There isn't some mantra or affirmation or, coach you're going to hire that's going to scream at you just the right way to make you do things. And honestly, you don't want that, because what that prevents you from doing is making the internal connections that allow you perpetuate doing it yourself. The growth that comes from internally inside you is going to be way longer lasting and more effective. So key number 3 is to anchor what actually matters to you. What do you actually care about? And if you don't care about having the magic morning or the perfect self-optimization hack, let that stuff go. That's okay. Being foundationally well to the things that you value is enough. So focus on what matters to you if you're looking to cultivate well-being. And the fourth key, maybe the most important key, I have to debate that one with myself for just a second, is that this might be the most important key. All right, I'll decide by the end of the episode if this is the most important key. I'm pretty sure it is. You have to do it for it to work. Well-being research, positive psychology, is not philosophy. It is a set of tools and practices. And I said in the beginning of this episode that I think that well-being for us normies, meaning not the researchers, right? We're just people on the ground living our lives, you and me. I don't do original research. I apply this stuff. So for us, I think well-being is two things: a mindset and a lifestyle. These are 4 keys to mindset. And the reason that I think this is actually the most important key, and I'm convincing myself as I'm talking, is because if it's a lifestyle is done in practice. It's done in living. And you have to do it for it to work. It's not a thought experiment. Yes, there are self-talk practices. Yes, reframing is part of this. And that's actually a behavior, right? I'm not thinking about being happy. I'm not thinking about being more positive. I'm reacting to my own thinking internally. That's a practice. Just like meditation is a practice, my internal dialogue is a practice. And so you have to do these things for them to take hold and shift your disposition and the way you get to show up in the world. So you have to go for the nature walks. You have to practice the gratitude. You have to keep the journal. You have to ask yourself, what are 3 good things that happened today? You have to focus on, how am I using my strengths today? Those are all active practices because well-being doesn't build itself. You don't trip and go, whoops, I found some well-being. Yahtzee. It takes work. And whenever I think about this idea, I always think about Fred Rogers from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. If you've watched either the Fred Rogers documentary or the fictional movie with, I think it's Tom Hanks, both of those films talk about how Fred Rogers didn't consider himself to be a dispositionally happy person. Mr. Rogers worked for it. He made a choice and an effort every day that he was going to be kind and try to help make other people happy. And I would argue that he did it. I'm still using things that he taught me when I was a kid, and I actively use them in my practice. My self-care workshop, I talk about him specifically because Fred Rogers is a perfect paragon of what it means to choose well-being, to put in the work. You have to do some excavation with yourself. You have to do some experimentation. What actually does fill me up? What does give me joy? And then over time, that might change. This just came up with a client today. They took a session. I do brush up sessions occasionally after clients I've worked with for a while. And she's been on a gap. She booked a session because what she wanted to know is, how do I make it all stick? How do I make the well-being stuff last? Because things keep changing. And when they change, I have to figure this stuff out again. And I'm like, yeah, that's called life. Of course they do. You are a person in a process of living a life, not a light switch. You are dynamic. You are a mind, you're a body, you're a self. And all of those things are highly malleable. They are meant to change, even when that change is uncomfortable. But that's the other cool thing about these tools, this mindset, these practices, they evolve with you as you continue to grow. And I often use the metaphor that building a lifestyle, building these systems, building well-being is like putting together a very complex Lego. And if you've never built a complex Lego, let me break this down for you. You put together little pieces, one or two together, and then you got a bunch of little combo pieces. And then you put those little combos together into bigger combos. And then you've got bigger components. And you've got, dozens of chunks of component parts. And then you put all of those component chunks together in bigger and bigger combinations until you have the Death Star or the Millennium Falcon. Or if you're not a Star Wars nerd, maybe you prefer the Enterprise. That actually happened last week. I was giving a presentation. I made a Star Wars joke. They all looked at me like crickets, and I said, "Would you rather you put together the Enterprise?" And they all applauded. They were Trekkies, not Star Trek, not Star Wars nerds. But hopefully that that metaphor comes through, that you're not going to learn one set of skills, check the box, and then Yahtzee, you've got it forever. The skills are going to evolve as you continue to grow and get momentum, and then they grow with you. That is not a bug. That's a feature, because the growing's not done until you punch that ticket we call the end of life. So let's recap these four. You ready? The absence of the bad isn't the same as the presence of the good. You have to actively engage in building the positive in your life, partly because we all have a negativity bias. Key number 2, not everything will work for everyone all of the time. You got to figure out what you're trying to build in your life and then find the practices that actually support you building it and getting around your roadblocks when they show up. Key number 3, focus on what matters most to you, because that's what's going to give you the most bang for your effort. Don't worry about all the other noise. There's always going to be somebody out there trying to sell you a new practice, a new idea, a new set of stuff, a new set of supplements. If you've got what matters to you and you're in service of it and you are foundationally well, Yahtzee, savor it. And then the last one, you have to do it for it to work. You can't just think about exercising, you have to exercise. You can't just think about mindfulness, you have to be mindful. You can't just think about, oh, I should really shut this screen off and go to sleep at a reasonable hour. You have to actually shut the phone down. You have to do these for them to work, because well-being isn't just a set of keys and ideas. It's a lifestyle, and lives are lived to be effective. All right, short and sweet. Those are my keys that are currently the foundation of the practice that I serve my clients in. And I would love to hear how these keys are in service of you. Or do you have other keys that you would add? Or do you want to challenge this? Do you think I'm totally off the base? I want to hear that feedback. Email me. It's info@darlene.coach. I'm on Instagram. That is also darlene.coach. And that's my website too. Ha! If you're a fan of the show, subscribe. Thank you to everyone who's been writing us a review. I hope that you would take a moment, if you haven't done so already, to go ahead and do that. If you are following us on YouTube, subscribe, leave a comment, give me that thumbs up, share about the show, tag me when you do. I always, always love hearing from you. It really does fill me up, and I so appreciate it when you reach out. Thank you so much. Take good care of yourselves and be well.